All those factors that we talked about in terms of supplies, some of the demand sources, all of those things impact the supply and demand dynamics for that market, or for really any agricultural commodity market. And really and truly, prices really are going to be primarily influenced by what's happening, either the supply or demand side of the equation, or both. As I mentioned earlier, as we start to move those ending stocks to much more manageable and tighter levels, we tend to see an increase in the price that our producers receive for those commodities. Over the last 4 or 5 years, however, we start to see some much more influence, in addition to supply and demand, influence from speculative interest in the market, those people that go in and just buy and sell soybean futures contracts to generate as an investment, and never want to have or own soybeans, or are not users of soybeans, or not producers of soybeans. And then other macroeconomic factors. As the economy slows down, both here in the U.S. and across the world, those can have impacts on where we see commodity prices go. Certainly other factors, other commodities, what's happening in the corn market, what's happening in the fuel markets, all of those things can have some influence on a short term on where we might see soybean prices go. But when you're looking at longer trends, we're still going to focus on the supply and demand factors. How much are we producing? How much are we selling? Where are we selling it to? As a determination of what price do we need to have, or what price does the market thinks we need to have for soybeans. When you look at how soybeans are sold, their soybeans are sold primarily on a visual appearance, which kind of gives Louisiana a little bit of a disadvantage. Louisiana historically has had produced soybeans that have higher protein and oil content than most of the Midwestern or Corn Belt states. However, because soybeans are priced on a visual appearance and not on a content of protein and oil, then we can be at disadvantage. The weather conditions that we have in Louisiana, the amount of insect and disease pressure we have here in Louisiana can affect pretty dramatically at some times the visual appearance of our soybeans. Even though we have much higher protein and oil content, that disadvantage of the visual appearance has been proven or has been seen in our marketplace for several years. When you look at futures prices or futures contracts are traded. These really and truly provide some price projections, or where prices may move in the future. And we'll talk about futures prices a little bit more here in a second. But they are, at a bare minimum, kind of a projection of where we may see prices move in the future. They are localized, or they are converted into what a producer here in Louisiana might expect to receive through what we call the basis levels. So we take futures prices, we localize them for our Louisiana producers through a basis level, and that gets us to a cash price, or a price that we would expect our producers to receive here in Louisiana. And when we talk about bidding or selling soybeans, generally cash bids are going to be made based on a plus or minus a particular futures contract. So you may hear an elevator say, our bid today is 40 over the November 2013 soybean futures contract. All that simply means is that the cash price that they're offering, you take the futures November 2013 futures contract price and you add 40 cents to that. And that would be the cash price that that producer at that particular elevator would be expected to be able to receive for his soybeans. So when we talk about how soybeans are bid, they're generally bid, again, as a basis level plus or minus a particular futures contract price. Talking about, again, the visual appearance of soybeans and how they are graded and sold. Again, here's a breakdown by USDA in terms of what constitutes a number 1, 2, number 3, number 4 U.S. soybean. And you can see here in terms of damaged kernels, the amount of foreign matter, the amount of split beans or split seed that we have in that sample, and then the color of the soybeans all have an impact in terms of what grade those soybeans will be given. We're here in Louisiana, as I mentioned, because of the disease, the weather, the insect pressure that we have, we can be a little bit higher on certainly the foreign matter, the splits, and the other off color that we have here in Louisiana, and that can really impact the grade that those soybeans will be given. That's important because when you look at, and this is just an example of a schedule of discounts for soybeans, primarily the standard for soybeans is a number 2 yellow U.S. soybean. That's the standard. Anything beyond that can generally receive discounts. So when you look at future soybean prices and you look at a futures contract and you hear that soybean, the November contract is trading at $12 a bushel, what that means is that's $12 a bushel for a number 2 U.S. yellow soybean. Anything beyond that, that price has to be adjusted for the differences in grade and quality that might be associated with the beans that are actually being sold. And you can see some discounts here for test weight, 1 to 4 cents depending on how low those test weights are. Heat damage, you can see here the percentages. Anything above a 2% would be something that could be rejected by the buyer. But here from a 1.5 to 2% heat damage, looking at a discount of about 12 cents a bushel, that's a pretty substantial discount. But they also have discounts for splits, for the amount of damaged soybeans that we have in a particular lot, for other factors like the smell, if there's a musty or a sour smell to the beans, and as well as for color. So there are a lot of different discounts. When you hear prices being quoted, those are typically being quoted for a certain grade and a certain standard of soybeans. Example, a U.S. number 2 yellow soybean. If a producer, depending on what that producer has, he could have a price that's quite a bit different from that once the discounts have been adjusted for. And in certain cases, when we get to issues that are well above some of these ranges that are set by the elevator or by the buyer, for example, if we get to damage above 8%, then that could simply mean that the elevator will reject to buy those or will refuse to buy those soybeans. So again, because soybeans are marketed on a visual, a visual appearance basis, and because of the situations, the growing conditions that we have in Louisiana, we can sometimes be at a disadvantage given that current market or that current pricing structure. Because when you look here, this is U.S. soybean quality percentages. This is a 5-year average from 2007 to 2012. This is conducted by the U.S. Soybean Board, United States Soybean Board, and they conduct this throughout the United States. And you can see here that the purple bar, the bar all the way to the left, is the percent protein on average from the soybeans produced in Louisiana. They've averaged over 35% during that 5-year period. And then the rest compares the Mid-South region, in which Louisiana is part of that Mid-South region. So Louisiana has historically been above the Mid-South region in terms of percent protein. And then as you look at the other bars there, the orange bar being the Western Corn Belt, the bluer bar being the Eastern Corn Belt, the red bar being the Southeast region, and the green bar being the East Coast region. Louisiana historically had a percent protein level in their soybeans that are higher than really anywhere else in the country. When you look at the percent oil protein, maybe not quite the advantage, but similar advantage that we see there. When you look at Louisiana's on average percent oil content in their soybeans versus what we see throughout the rest of the United States. Again, that doesn't help us very much because of the way that we currently market or sell soybeans, and particularly when you look at this factor, the only factor that the United States Soybean Board followed during that time frame or during their surveys is percent foreign matter. But this kind of gives you an idea of some of the discounts that we could have here in Louisiana relative to other parts of the United States. Again, even though we're higher protein, higher oil content, we're also much higher foreign matter content or percent foreign matter than we have both here in the Mid-South region as well as across the rest of the United States.